and welcome back to the Rivals Report, the show that gets you up to speed on Rivals esports news in a nice, bite-sized package. My name is Diatonic, and this is the Rivals Report number 43 for the week of April 6th, 2026, powered by Gamer Advantage. On this week's report, the Ignite Preseason marches on, with the Americas and EMEA wrapping up group stage and Asia Pacific just getting started. We've got a look at the results and some key storylines to review. And speaking of the Pacific Series, we're also running through the profiles of both the Asia and Oceania guest teams. And in community tournament news, Aramori's Game Changers Cup is underway, giving the spotlight to the women and players of marginalized genders in the community. We'll take a look at how it works and review some highlights from the first tournament. Well, we're now 2 weeks into the Marvel Rivals Ignite Preseason, and it's been quite the roller coaster in multiple ways. This past weekend saw the group stages wrap up for the Americas and EMEA regions, with the Asia branch of the Pacific region kicking off. We're starting to witness the rise of some new powerhouses, the fall of some legacy competitors, and some intensely close matchups that are starting to set the pace for the rest of the season. In the Americas Group A, Swamp Gaming rose to the top with a 5-0 record overall, dropping only a single map to FlyQuest. NRG Shock finished out strong at 3-2, while 100 Thieves and Sentinels survived the cutoff with 2-3 records each. Cafe Rose just barely fell below the cutoff due to tiebreakers, and FlyQuest rounds out the field at 1-4. Over on the Group B side, Liquid Citadel complete a perfect group stage run at 5-0 with a 10-0 overall map score. Space Station Gaming and Yeah We Lost both advanced with 3-2 records, with Lunex securing the last spot at 2-3. Nightmare and TSM both get eliminated from the preseason with 1-4 records. Of course, one of the biggest questions coming out of the group stage is, can anyone stop Liquid Citadel? As previously mentioned, they took on all challengers and sent them away without a single map to show for it. And there were some arguably credible threats to their perfect record, with teams like SSG certainly more than capable of at least taking a map off them. But there are still some threats they've yet to face from Group A, namely coming from NRG and of course Swamp. We've got our eyes peeled for the TLC versus Swamp matchup, as they've emerged as the clear frontrunners in this region, but it looks like the first hurdle for Liquid to overcome will be Sentinels in the first round of the playoffs. There was a nail-biter of a situation unfolding on Sunday night, as the last couple of playoff slots in Group A were being decided. Early on that day, Cafe Rose delivered a stunner to 100 Thieves, upsetting them in a 2-1 barn burner of a series. That actually left the Thieves' playoff slot in limbo, and it left their fate in the hands of the later Sentinels versus NRG match thanks to tiebreakers. Going into that match, if NRG won, then the Thieves would be safe and move on to playoffs. But if Sentinels pulled out the win, then Cafe Rose would effectively eliminate 100 Thieves from contention. Everyone was on the edge of their seat during that matchup, and what a match it was! Both teams battled it out, taking it all the way to the third map, but after a wicked full hold from NRG, they'd shock the world, overthrow Sentinels, and cast Cafe Rose out of the preseason tournament, so painfully close to advancing to the next stage. But while one MRC qualifier fell in heartbreaking fashion, another was able to pull together a massive week 2 in Lunex. Lunex had a rough start to their preseason, being defeated by Liquid Citadel, TSM, and YWL, scoring just one map off TSM across 3 series. And when they stepped into their first Week 2 match against Nightmare, things weren't looking much better as they dropped map 1. They were basically being written off, and it felt like the fans had stopped paying attention to them altogether. But after that first map loss to Nightmare, Lunex would go on a tear through the rest of the weekend. They'd battle it out against Nightmare and take the reverse sweep, then move on to a dramatic win-and-in match against Space Station to close out the AMER group stage. The pressure was on, the lights were brighter than they'd ever been, and they were between a rock and a hard place. But this team was hungry for the win and hungry for a playoff spot. They'd absolutely dominate on Krakoa to start off, then pull off a huge win on a map they've been struggling with all tournament long in Midtown. They banished their demons in the heart of New York to slide into playoffs by a razor-thin margin, surpassing both a guest team in Nightmare and a partner team in TSM. Shifting gears to the EMEA region, Team Heretics would overthrow Na'Vi and emerge as the #1 seed out of Group A, winning all 10 maps they played in the group stage. Na'Vi weren't far behind at 4-1, with the only other team to take a map off them, Shikigami, right behind them at 3-2. Team Peps would manage to climb out of the danger zone and secure the last qualifier spot at 2-3, with Alter and Pulsar Esports being eliminated at 1-4 and 0-5 respectively. Over in Group B, defending world champs Virtus Pro would run the group at 5-0, also a perfect run through groups. Rad clocked a solid 4-1 finish as well, with Fire Strays and Vision Esports rounding out the qualifiers at 2-3 each. Crowdfall and Reason Gaming both depart the preseason tournament with 1-4 records. Eyes are on Team Heretics coming out of the group stage, as they of course secured the top seed from Group A and did so by handing powerhouse Na'Vi a 2-0 defeat. Navi are, of course, the squad formerly operating under Rad Esports, the very same team that won the mid-season finals last year and placed runner-up at the 2025 Grand Finals at DreamHack Atlanta. The Heretics roster is made up of Ignite veterans, and for many of them, the silent heroes for their former teams. The players that weren't necessarily the superstars or the leaders, but hard workers in their own right. Of course, they've yet to cross paths with Virtus Pro, but defeating Navi is a sign that this team has risen to powerhouse status within the region, making them the third pillar alongside those two aforementioned teams. There could be another potential challenger in Rad as well, but time will tell whether they can keep pace with the likes of Navi or Heretics. Another team worth highlighting after week 2 is that of Fire Strays, who had a rough start to their group stage, falling victim to Rad and Reason during the first week. After that, they surely had a pit in their stomach looking at week 2, realizing they'd likely need to win 2 out of their 3 matches, and one of them being against Virtus Pro. They came out the gate swinging with a huge 2-0 win over Crownfall on day 4, instilling some hope that they'd claw past the cutoff into playoffs. Their match against Virtus Pro would end up being a 2-0, but they'd actually push VP to the edge on map 1, forcing them to play out all 3 points of domination, the only team throughout the entire group stage to do so. That would make the Strays matchup against Vision a must-win to qualify for playoffs, and they'd take that series 2-0, locking in the 3rd seed out of Group B. It does seem that the Fire Strays were able to make VP sweat at least a little bit, but another team that did so, ironically enough, was Rad. The irony there being that Rad were the first team to hand Virtus Pro a full loss back during 2025 Ignite Stage 1. Of course, this is a different Rad roster than the ones who gave VP some trouble back then, but during map 2 of their matchup against Rad on day 6, they'd go to war on Central Park. Both teams have managed to clear the map, with Rad actually ending up with 225 in the time bank as they headed into extra rounds. And with them already having cleared it once, we were on the edge of our seats, waiting to see if this new Rad roster could follow in the footsteps of Rad's past. But even with just 60 seconds, Virtus Pro would power through, nearly pushing the cart all the way to Dracula's throne room yet again before Rad were able to make the stop. After switching sides, Rad would actually make a solid push themselves, but weren't able to get to checkpoint 5, giving VP the map and series win. And we'd get our first look at the Asian teams over the weekend, as preseason would kick off for the Asia Pacific region as well. Zero Tenacity and Pirates would emerge as early contenders for the throne, both ending 3-0, winning all 6 maps they've played so far. MRC qualifiers AAAD would win a doubleheader on day 3, putting their record at 3-1 overall. Returning squad XOXO01 were off to a fair start as well, coming in 4th in the standings with an even 2-2 record. Rival Esports would fall to 1-2, but remain in the safe zone for now. And surprisingly, Reject would start off the preseason with a 1-3 record, hovering just outside of elimination. N1 Hex and Loyalty currently sit in the elimination spots with 1-3 and 0-3 records respectively. We of course need to talk about what's been happening with Reject, the Asia Pacific partner team. There were high hopes for this squad coming into the preseason, and they started off strong with a rank-and-file 2-0 win against N1 Hex. They'd take a tough 0-2 loss to Pirates in day 2, but seeing as Pirates are a team comprised of Ignite veterans, it's fair to say that match was always up in the air. But that loss seemed to have sent them reeling, as they'd lose both matches of a doubleheader to AAAD and Zero Tenacity. They comfortably took map 1 off AAAD, but made a number of errors that led to maps 2 and 3 being handed to the MRC qualifier team, a surprising result that left us absolutely stunned. They played a strange symbiotic surface match where it felt like they got cold feet and never could commit to an engage, puzzling us on the desk and the fans as well. Their second match of the doubleheader was against Zero Tenacity, and they had some good looks on map 1. But they'd counterpicked a symbiotic surface yet again, and yet again would be full held by Z10, facing an 0-2 defeat. But speaking of Zero Tenacity, this roster has quickly emerged as a force to be reckoned with, taking on some tough Asian opponents and overcoming them every step of the way. Their win against Loyalty was somewhat expected, but their match against EXO would be a good gauge of where they sat in the power hierarchy, as EXO's been competing in Ignite for a while now. And they'd take a 2-0 win off the loose cannons of the Asia region, sending their stocks sky high. And if they could beat Reject in their last match of the week, it would certainly cement them as a powerhouse. But Z10 will be starting their week 2 with their toughest challenge yet in Pirates. Z10 versus Pirates will truly be the battle for Asia, with the winner almost certainly walking away the undisputed strongest team in the region for now. The third-ranked team in the Asia region also deserves some flowers, that of AAAD. A large chunk of their core have experience in other hero shooter titles, and many of them have competed in the MRC or Ignite before, but this is by far the best performance they've had in Rivals thus far. They had a close match against XOXO01 that ended in a 1-2 defeat, but they've been taking names ever since, besting the likes of Rival Esports and Reject. And considering how strong Pirates have been looking too, it seems as though the MRC Season 6 class of qualified teams certainly have some claws to them. The Americas and EMEA regions will be on break for a week, giving teams a chance to prepare themselves ahead of the start of playoffs from April 16th to 19th. But the Ignite action will continue, as we'll have the Asia teams back in action for week 2, and the China preseason will also kick off, featuring some returning squads like Iconics, Fiat Lux, and defending China champions OUG. I'll be back on the desk alongside CV on Friday to bring you more Asia Pacific matches, including the marquee matchup between Zero Tenacity and Pirates. Be sure to tune in via the official Rivals YouTube or Twitch channels, or in-game via the Esports tab. On last week's Rivals Report, we brought you some brief profiles on the guest teams at Ignite, teams invited directly to the circuit by NetEase, but teams that aren't afforded the revenue sharing and relegation protections that partner teams have. We introduce you to the guests in the Americas and EMEA regions, and this week, we're giving you the info you need to get up to speed on the Asia and Oceania guest teams. We'll start off with the guest team that currently stands at the top of the Asia region rankings, Zero Tenacity. Z10 were founded back in the late 2010s and have spent some time competing in other esports titles in the MOBA and fighting game genres. But Ignite 2026 isn't their first foray into Rivals, as they mustered rosters for EMEA Stage 1 last year, then switched over to the Asia region for Stage 2. This team brings together some veteran Asian players like Xe and Marvel, alongside import players like Baser and Soko, who previously played with EgoDeath. This is by far the toughest roster the org has mustered thus far, already poising themselves to be one of the new powerhouses of the region. We also have another returning quantity this year in Rival Esports, a young Singaporean org with some experience in battle royales as well as some mobile esports. They do field a couple of Singaporean players in Lumi and Proxies, but also bring players from Korea, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Botswana. But this too isn't Rivals' first time competing in Marvel Rivals, as they also made appearances in the 2025 Rivals Invitational as well as Asia Stage 1 last year. They're still looking to find their footing and have firmly planted themselves in the middle of the pack for now. We've also got one other guest team in Asia, the unsigned XOXO01. This team came together back in early 2025 and aren't affiliated with an esports organization, meaning they are unsigned and exist expressly to compete in Rivals. Though the roster has changed since they first came on the scene, some of its founding members remain, like Zetha, Rester, and Sungjuk Woo. They've been a top competitor as well, having finished top 4 in both stages of Ignite last year, and also have multiple top 3s in the MRC. This is truly a case of always being the bridesmaid, but EXO are looking to make the 2026 season their wedding. They're off to a fair start, clocking a 2-2 record in the first week of the preseason. Now heading down under, we've got to look at the Oceania guest teams, starting with a returning force in Kanga Esports. Kanga were founded back in 2017 and are based out of Melbourne and Sydney. They were originally founded explicitly for hero shooter competition, so it's no shock to see them throwing their hat in the Rivals ring. The Kanga have been competing in Marvel Rivals since the Season 0 MRC, were actually the champions of the 2025 Invitational in Oceania, and competed in both Stages 1 and 2 of Ignite. And though their current roster has undergone a number of changes, it's clear that they've been able to find success in the past as one of the top teams out of Oceania. Also returning to the Ignite battlefield this season is Fury, an Australian org with a wealth of experience in other shooter titles. Like their counterparts in Kanga, their first foray into Rivals was back during the 2025 Invitational, where they'd actually crossed paths with Kanga for the first time. They'd go dark for a while afterwards, but would be back in time for Stage 2 of Ignite, and have been competing ever since. They've been in search of a real breakout season, bringing together a roster of veteran talent from other teams like Daxu, Haluk, Konya, and more. And rounding out the Pacific Series guest team lineup is Vulcan Red, yet another name you may recognize. They were established back in 2025 to compete in Marvel Rivals, finding their way into Stage 2 via the Open Qualifiers, clocking a top 4 finish in the Season 3 MRC, and capping off their year with a runner-up finish in Stage 2. Like many of the other guest teams, they're bringing a new roster to the table here, calling upon some veteran competitors like Chronic, Solman, and even Impunity, formerly of Dark Zero. And that rounds out all the guest teams competing in the Americas, EMEA, and Pacific series of Ignite. We've already seen some of these guest teams, such as Swamp, Rad, and Zero Tenacity, emerging as tough competition for the partner teams and MRC qualifiers, so they're definitely squads to keep your eye on. We highly recommend exploring their backgrounds and rosters via the in-game Esports tab for even more info about these teams. And switching to this week's community tournament news, a big name in the competitive rival scene is helping to shine a light on her fellow women and players of marginalized gender. 2025 Stage 1 champion and former Sentinels main roster strategist Aramori has organized a series of events, including tournaments and coaching sessions, to help some of the underrepresented players in the scene up their game and help get them ready for the big leagues. Welcome to Aramori's Game Changers Cup. Not just a simple tournament, the AGCC is essentially a micro ecosystem, similar to Game Changers initiatives in other esports with the same aim of uplifting players of marginalized genders. Though the goal is to prepare them for a main final tournament at the end of the month, the AGCC is a series of both tournaments and coaching sessions designed to help players at high ranks move from just ranked ladder grinders to competitive ready players. But there's no one more prepared to explain the event than Aramori herself.
Teams get scrambled every week. So the way that it works is week 1 team is going to be different than week 2 team. Week 2 team is going to be different than week 3 team, so on and so forth. Scrambled team, just like scrambled freaking eggs. There's going to be a free coaching session, okay? And each week is going to be a different role focus. So the first week is going to be strategist, which means there's going to be a special guest coach for strategists coming in. Oh, but I wonder who that's going to be. And that'll happen on Tuesday. And then the actual tournament will happen again on Friday at 6 p.m. And this week, week 4, is Grand Finals week. We're going to be kind of keeping track of how players do in week 1, week 2, week 3. And we're going to try and balance teams. And then Grand Finals, double elimination, prize pool of 6K. And there's also going to be an MVP player bonus, right?
Not only that, but there's truly no one better equipped in Rivals to spearhead this initiative, as Aramori's support for women and marginalized genders has long been a part of her identity and social media presence. She's the first female champion in the Rivals space after winning Stage 1 alongside Sentinels, and has become a trailblazer for women not just in competitive Rivals, but in esports in general. The first tournament of the Game Changers Cup has come and gone, giving us our first look at the full field of players, and an opportunity to see where they're at in terms of skill at the beginning of the event. Plus, these tournaments leading up to the Grand Finals also feature a $1,200 prize pool, so it's the first opportunity for them to start stacking the cash as well. The players are divided up into 4 teams and pitted against each other, with the winners of the preliminary matches facing off for a winner-takes-all final match. Team Loki and Team Sai will be the winning teams set to fight for the first prize of the series, featuring some prominent female names in the Rivals community like Cleo, Snowette, Olive, and SK. Names you may very well be familiar with if you're tuned into Rivals social media. So it would be a marquee matchup to wrap up the first AGCC tournament, and we'd even get an opportunity to hear the comms as Aramori would sit in on the team's voice calls while the matches played out. The finals kicked off on Celestial Husk to start, and right out of the gate, Team Loki would run away with an early lead. Point 1 would be a comfortable 0 to 100, as would point 2, wrapping up a quick map 1 and positioning Team Loki for a very early match point. And it was off to a rocko for the deciding match, with Team Sai on the attack first. But Team Loki put up an absolute iron curtain of a defense to start off, holding Team Sai short of checkpoint 1. And the vibes were immaculate after halftime, with Ninjun leading the charge for the team with some laser Black Widow shots. The pressure was on for frame 1, and in just over 2 minutes, Team Loki would lock in the 2-0 sweep and take home the first prize of the Game Changers Cup. But of course, this is only the first step along the way of the AGCC, and this is before any of the scheduled coaching sessions. The strategist players will get the first round of coaching this week, more than likely with Aramori herself stepping in to provide some insights. And teams are being reshuffled ahead of the second event, so it'll be all new showdowns when Tournament 2 rolls around at the end of the week. The teams will be slowly upskilling throughout each week, given more time on the battlefield and more of the coaching sessions. Those sessions, as well as every tournament in this series, will be streamed over on Aramori's Twitch channel, so be sure to keep checking in to see the battles getting more and more intense. Well, that's all for this week's Rivals Report. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on the latest in Marvel Rivals Esports. And follow me on other platforms including X and TikTok for more Rivals Esports content. And if your eyewear is in need of an upgrade, look no further than Gamer Advantage. With blue light protective lenses to protect your eyes during those hardcore ranked grinds, Gamer Advantage will help take your eyewear to the next level. Get your glasses using the link in the description to get yourself a discount and help support the channel. I've been Diatonic, you've been amazing, and I'll see you in game.